In my first life, my sister and I married into the Caldwell family on the same day, like two ribbons tied to the same cold gift box. She looked at the eldest son, Adrian Caldwell, and sneered. He was the kind of man who smiled as if it cost him blood, the kind of man who watched people the way hunters watch movement in tall grass. Gloomy, suspicious, a walking storm, she whispered, then rushed straight toward the second son. Silas Caldwell was the opposite on the surface. Quiet, clean, almost ethereal. He wore sandalwood like a second skin and carried himself with that distant calm you only see in people who've spent too long around incense and silence. The tabloids called him the Buddhist heir, like devotion could be inherited like stock. My sister wanted the aesthetic, not the emptiness. She couldn't endure the loneliness. She couldn't stand being married to a man who treated desire like a distraction, who loved control more than affection. She cheated carelessly, publicly, like she wanted punishment more than pleasure. Silas gave it to her, not with rage, with ritual, with cold precision, with a set of prayer beads that became a leash and a downfall that turned her name into a high society joke overnight. Meanwhile, I married Adrian. People thought I was the fool, marrying the family's most unpredictable son. They didn't know the truth. Adrian wasn't romantic. Adrian was strategic. He only played devoted husband because I held his company's financial lifeline in my hands. I managed the assets, the accounts, the secrets. I was the lock on the vault he lived in. And I lived well. I lived lavishly. I lived in love, or at least in something that looked like it from a distance, until the day my sister shoved me off a high building. I remember the wind ripping a scream out of my throat. I remember the sky spinning like a coin. I remember the sound at the end, a sound that wasn't a sound at all. Then I opened my eyes. We were back on the day of our engagement, same chandeliered hall, same silk dresses, same polite laughter that never reached anyone's eyes. The Caldwell family's engagement banquet was a battlefield disguised as a celebration, and I could smell the war in the perfume. My sister, Vanessa, stood beside me in white, her face too soft for the poison in her gaze. I didn't need a mirror to know my own expression. I felt the calm settle in my bones like a blade sliding into its sheath. She had come back too. I knew because the moment she saw Adrian across the room, something in her eyes sparked, not love, not admiration, but hunger, the kind of hunger that only rebirth could sharpen. Just a second ago, she was telling our parents, sweet as sugar, that she would only marry Silas. Then she turned and shoved me straight into Silas's arms. Gasps rippled through the hall. "Silas has admired you for a long time," Vanessa announced, voice bright, almost playful. "He won't marry anyone but you. Go on. Sister, don't be shy. Call him your husband already." It was a flawless move, public, irreversible, a trap built from etiquette. I stumbled, reaching for the edge of a table, but strong hands caught me first. A faint scent of sandalwood curled around my breath. Silas steadied me, then let go immediately, like touch itself was a compromise. "Miss Clare," he said, voice deep and unreadable. "Be careful." His eyes were calm, too calm, the calm of someone who could watch a person fall and still finish their tea. Lowering my gaze, I gave him a shy smile, soft enough to satisfy the room. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell." Men like Silas cared about appearances, about order. If I showed discomfort, he'd become wary, and in this new life, I couldn't afford to be seen as a variable. I glanced up just in time to catch Vanessa's look of triumph, so she believed she'd pushed me into a nightmare. She didn't understand the joke was on her, because even if she hadn't forced my hand, I would have chosen Silas myself. Silas wasn't interested in love, but he was interested in agreements, in boundaries, in clean lines drawn in black ink. He had endless wealth, and he gave his wife complete freedom as long as she didn't cross his bottom line. Adrian, on the other hand, was charming chaos wrapped in tailored perfection. The people around him were all smiling predators, pretending to be guests. In my first life, he only treated me well because I held the power to ruin him. If Silas was a ruthless wolf, Adrian was a venomous snake. Vanessa drifted toward Adrian like a moth toward a flame it thought was a star. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, all softness and invitation. Adrian's lips curled into a dazzling smile. My, he said, amused. What a thoughtful sister. He offered her his hand for the first dance. Vanessa took it without hesitation, desperate to secure him before I could steal what she thought was mine, and I watched her walk straight into the same trap that killed me. A month later, Vanessa called me on video, draped in silk and smugness, bruises of passion painted carefully into proof of victory. Look, she purred, lifting a sapphire necklace to the camera. Auction piece, worth 30 million. Adrian adores me. She leaned closer, eyes gleaming. The eldest inherits everything. I'll be Mrs. Caldwell, the future head of Meridian Group. You'll get crumbs. Fate loves me, Claire. I laughed softly. You're celebrating early. Everyone knows Adrian collects promises like souvenirs. Once you marry him, you'll spend your days swatting away women who think they still own him. Vanessa's chin lifted. He swore I'm the only one now. He made a vow. A vow, I echoed, smiling. From Adrian Caldwell, her voice turned sharp. Stay away from my husband. If I ever catch you trying anything, I'll break your legs. I believed her. In my first life, she broke my body. This time, I would break her myth. While Vanessa drowned the internet in photos of true love, I lived like a queen in silence. Silas never appeared in person at first. He sent gifts instead, jewelry and deeds and quiet approvals, while he meditated in temples or flew overseas to meet spiritual masters. Rich, absent, uninvolved, peaceful. It was perfect, but I didn't crawl back from death just to be decorative. I built. Stocks first, then land, then rare art, then stakes in media networks and influencer incubators. With the future in my pocket, every move became a sure win. The market didn't feel like gambling anymore. It felt like memory. 10 days after our marriage certificate was signed, Silas returned unexpectedly and invited me to dinner. He poured tea himself, slow and deliberate. In 10 days, he said calmly, you've spent over 100 million. I lifted the cup, unbothered. Your black cards have daily limits. Otherwise, I would have spent more. A faint smirk touched his mouth. You're not afraid I'll call you reckless? I set the cup down and met his gaze. Only useless men complain about a woman spending money. Silas's eyes darkened with a flicker of amusement. Then he spoke plainly, as if discussing the weather. You can invest however you like. If you need connections or funding, ask. But I came today because a friend wants a piece of land you own in the southern suburbs. He plans to build a shopping centre. Name your price. I smiled, already calculating the next 10 moves ahead. We're family, I said softly. Your friend is my friend. Why talk about money? I said lightly, as if we were discussing the weather. I'll have the land title transferred to your friend first thing tomorrow. For the first time since we met, Silas Caldwell actually paused. His teacup hovered mid-air, perfectly steady, yet his gaze sharpened by a fraction, like a blade catching a thin strip of light. That plot in the southern suburbs was the very land I'd bought on our wedding day after I'd quietly sold the billion-dollar estate he'd gifted me and poured my stock market winnings into something that would multiply fast. If I sold it now, I'd make at least 4 times my cost, and here I was offering it like a casual favour. Of course, I wasn't that generous. It was the oldest trick in the book. retreat to advance. If I named a price, they could negotiate me down. If I refused to name one, the only way to repay me without losing face was to offer the highest market rate, plus whatever extra dignity they needed to paste over their surprise. Powerful families don't like being seen as cheap. Silas studied me for a long moment, then set his cup down with a soft, decisive click. "What's your angle?" he asked. I kept my expression innocent. "Isn't it obvious?" He didn't blink. "It's because I like you," I continued, letting 3 simple sentences corner him without force. "Because I chose you. Because I'm happy here." For the first time, his mouth curved into something that wasn't his usual polite, distant smirk. There was a flicker of something almost boyish, almost curious, as if he'd just discovered a rule he'd never been taught. "You expect me to believe that?" he said, amusement threading through his voice. "I expect you to understand it," I replied calmly. "You've met my parents. You know what they are, opportunists. If I hadn't married you, they would have sold me to someone else for power and resources. You are objectively the best option I had." Silas's brow lifted slightly. "You prefer a quiet, detached life," I went on. "I prefer building an empire. We don't demand romance from each other, and we don't lie about what we want. Our partnership is clean, efficient, win-win." That word, partnership, landed differently than flattery. Silas chuckled low and brief, and I saw interest spark behind his eyes. His entire life he'd been trained to stay in the background, to be humble, to never outshine his older brother. But I was not the kind of woman who dimmed herself to make anyone comfortable. Soon, he started taking me to dinners with his inner circle. Not the spoiled airs Adrian collected like party favours. Silas's circle was made of real power players, men whose assistants had assistants, men whose time was so expensive you had to book a conversation months in advance. Because I already knew which markets would surge and which companies would collapse, I impressed them fast. At first, I talked business. Then I was invited to private tea gatherings where deals were decided before contracts were drafted. Powerful men respected strength in women the same way women respected strength in men. Quiet competence was the most seductive thing in any room. Silas's attitude toward me shifted without announcement. He began pouring my tea himself, remembering what snacks I liked, personally calling brokers to secure the exact office space I wanted for my newest venture. He even helped me poach top talent from rival firms with a precision that felt almost intimate. Then the Caldwell family decided to balance the scales. Vanessa finally earned the approval of Mrs. Caldwell, and as a reward, she was handed control of Meridian Group's hotel and jewelry divisions. The news ran glowing headlines about her being the ideal wealthy wife, graceful, capable, ambitious. So, to be fair, I was assigned a division too. Fashion, the worst one, a bottomless pit of failure dressed up in expensive fabric. Since its launch, it had ranked dead last in profitability. They'd thrown money at celebrity designers, flown in creative directors from abroad, burned through at least 50 leadership changes in 5 years, and still couldn't produce a single collection anyone wanted to buy. In the industry, it was openly mocked as Meridian's biggest embarrassment. It wasn't a gift, it was a humiliation. Silas frowned when he heard. "Tourism is booming. I can talk to my parents, get you reassigned." I waved him off. "No." He looked at me, surprised. "I love turning the tide when the odds are against me," I said, voice steady. "Give me 1 month. Watch." Admiration flickered across his gaze like a candle catching flame. Inside the company, sabotage was expected. So I arrived like a storm. First, I fired 2/3 of the old employees, the ones who survived on connections instead of competence, the ones who smothered talented newcomers before they could breathe. When they tried to appeal upstairs, Silas shut them down personally. By afternoon, resignation letters slid in quietly like defeated flags. Next, I went straight to the nation's top art schools. I asked professors for their best students and offered something irresistible: real jobs, real pay, real runway access. Every week, I held themed design competitions with cash prizes and immediate contracts. They got money and a future. I got fresh genius at a fraction of the cost. Then I launched a digital campaign so aggressive it flooded every screen that mattered. Finally, I hosted a fashion showcase and invited industry leaders, socialites, and celebrities. No one dared refuse an invitation stamped with Meridian's crest. They arrived expecting a dull networking event. Instead, they watched a resurrection. The designs were stunning, not safe, not tired, not imitation. By the end of the night, every showcase piece was pre-ordered on the spot. The first collection sold out before the champagne went flat. 10 years of losses clawed back in one move, and my name became a legend. While the spotlight praised me, I turned my eyes to Vanessa's empire. It didn't take much to find cracks in a hotel chain run by vanity instead of discipline. A single whistleblower video was enough to ignite public outrage. Then a whisper about borrowed jewelry designs became a roar. When you take down an opponent, you don't swing at their armor. You aim for the seam. Vanessa panicked. She poured money into suppressing the press. But once people decide you're incompetent, no amount of spending can buy back respect. She was removed from key positions and shoved into minor projects that looked like work and felt like exile. At the next family gathering, Adrian finally snapped. In public, he was always polished, always charming, always the perfect heir, but resentment has a way of spilling. "Can you shut up for 1 minute?" he hissed at Vanessa in front of everyone, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You keep comparing me to Silas. If you think he's so amazing, why didn't you marry him?" The room froze. Vanessa's face went bright red, trembling with humiliation, and I sat there quietly, cake on my plate, calm in my throat, thinking, not finished, not even close. Does she even know her place? Old Master Caldwell's voice cracked through the room like a whip. The moment those words landed, his cane struck the marble once, hard, and everyone went silent. Adrian Caldwell had been raging only seconds ago, face twisted with disdain, but the patriarch didn't give him time to recover. He stepped forward and slapped Adrian twice, sharp and humiliating, right in front of the entire family circle. "Worthless!" the old man spat. "If you keep disgracing this name, you are no son of mine." That sobered Adrian faster than cold water. His whole life had been built around one dream: inheriting Meridian Group, wearing the crown, being untouchable. And now he could feel it slipping from his fingers like sand. He bowed his head immediately, voice turning syrupy with panic. Apologies poured out of him in a rush. Promises followed, desperate and loud. He swore he would never fool around again, swore he would never lay a hand on Vanessa again, swore he would be a perfect husband, a perfect heir, a perfect son. Then, to seal the performance, he offered a gift, a private estate worth over 60 million. Vanessa's eyes lit up. Her tears dried as if someone had flipped a switch. Her shaking stopped. Her anger softened into something theatrical and sweet, the kind of softness she only wore when it benefited her. She leaned into Adrian, playing the loving wife who had only lost control because she cared too much. A scumbag and a fool, truly a match made in heaven. When the commotion finally died down, Vanessa stopped me before I could leave. She offered me a condescending smile, as if she were older, wiser, kinder. Sisters fight, couples fight. That's normal, she said. If there's no fighting, there's no love. She lifted her chin, like she was delivering a lesson to a child. Don't be fooled by how bad I look right now. It's not serious. I just need rest. Besides, everyone saw how devoted I am. Adrian feels guilty, and I got an estate. Out of it. She actually smiled, proud of herself. So in the end, I won. I laughed, not politely, not gently. Vanessa, I said, voice calm but razor sharp. You really are cheap. Her smile faltered. You traded half your life for a $60 million cage, I continued, and you're calling it a win. Vanessa's mouth tightened. Then she recovered fast, superiority returning like a Pravichka. You wouldn't understand, she scoffed. My husband comes home every night. Yours barely exists. What's the point of having a man if he's never around? At least I have a husband by my side. I let out a cold little chuckle. I may not understand the fun of physical fights in a marriage, I said, but I do know one thing. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice so only she could hear the sting. Adrian has unusual tastes, and he's never been picky about who he shares them with. Vanessa's face drained so quickly, it was almost impressive. That's impossible, she whispered, but her fingers were already trembling as she reached for her phone, jabbing the call button for hospital staff like it was a lifeline. Watching her scramble didn't satisfy me, not yet. That same night, while she raced to get tested and reassure herself with denial, I made my own quiet call. I didn't need to invent scandals. Adrian had created enough of them for a lifetime. I simply placed the most incriminating footage in the hands of people who would spread it like fire. Multiple platforms, multiple accounts, no fingerprints. By morning, the internet had found its new feast. Public outrage detonated, not because people were surprised, but because this time there was proof. The polished air image shattered, the gentleman mask cracked, videos of his cruelty, his chaos, his violent temper, all stitched together into a single, ugly narrative. Meridian Group stock dropped hard. An emergency shareholders meeting was called before lunch. Adrian, still clinging to his title like a drowning man clings to a plank, was forced to resign. His friends began getting investigated, one after another. Rumours turned into arrests. Names vanished from social circles overnight. And then the board did what boards always do when panic rises. They redistributed power to the safest hand. Silas Caldwell. He had been at home when the news hit, sipping tea like the world was still quiet, carving a lotus seed bracelet with careful fingers. With one decision, he went from the second son to the only heir. People thought he would refuse. The dutiful Buddhist, the detached man. He didn't, because power, once offered, is a responsibility. And Silas had been underestimated for far too long. Within days, he was appointed CEO. And me. I was named vice president. Not as a decorative favour, as a move of strategy, because when you control results, you control respect. The day Vanessa was discharged from the hospital, she stormed into my office like a broken queen trying to reclaim a throne that had never belonged to her. Her face was haggard, eyes bloodshot, rage leaking through every breath. Claire, she hissed, you shameless snake! How dare you steal my husband's company? Give everything back to Adrian immediately, or else. Before I could even reply, a cold voice cut through the room from the doorway. Are you threatening my wife? Vanessa flinched so hard she almost stumbled. Silas stood there, calm as winter, eyes sharp enough to make the air feel thinner. Vanessa's lips parted, and for a second, fear won. You misunderstand, she stammered, forcing a smile that looked painful. I was joking. We grew up like this. She's my sister. I care about her. Silas gave her a look that felt like judgment carved in stone. You'd better hope that's true. Then he walked to me, ignoring her completely. From his pocket, he took out a bracelet. Lotus seeds, polished smooth, each bead marked with tiny cuts from his own careful carving. He slid it onto my wrist with a gentleness that didn't belong in boardrooms. I took it to the temple, he said quietly. It's been blessed, wear it. His voice was soft, but the meaning was iron. This was protection. This was possession. This was a public line drawn in front of everyone who might think to test me. Vanessa's pupils tightened. Her expression shifted from disbelief to something hotter, uglier, and far more dangerous. She stared at the bracelet like it was an insult. Then she looked at me like she was remembering the edge of a rooftop, and I smiled back, already one step ahead, already hearing the sound of doors that would soon slam shut around her.